Should we start? Should we start right now?
Cool.
We should start. Okay. Great. Just a second. Yeah. Hello and welcome to all of you. My name is Vaishnavi and I'm from the Theory Club of St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. I'm going to be your host today, and we have with us Shifa Zoya, who is going to present her research paper on housing and rent discrimination. So, for all those who are new to this channel, I would like to tell you all about the Theory Club. So, at Theory Club, our initiative is to deconstruct complex theories into simpler concepts, which are more understandable and also applicable to the lives of students from diverse students and people from diverse backgrounds. And our today's discussion is a part of a series called the Lab Rat and Field Mice, where we want to give platform to students like Shifa herself to present and talk about their research papers, and then also in a way, give tips and suggestions to the junior researchers. So if you think that you are one of them who wants to present and talk about their research papers, do email us at theoryclub@gmail.com. Great. So let's move forward to our speaker. Hello, Shifa. How are you today? How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So I would like to introduce you all to Shifa. And so, guys, Shifa is a student was a student of St. Xavier's College and has completed her BA in psychology and anthropology. She has done a double majors. And Shifa tells us that she likes burying her nose in children's book rather than talking to strangers. And I think that is quite relatable. And thank you so much, Shifa, for being with us. We are really grateful to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great, great. So we'll now move on. Without further ado, we'll move on to the topic. So, Shifa, can you at first brief us about your topic, about your research paper, and like what does rent discrimination entail, and what is the scope of your research paper?
So, this was done as part of our undergrad requirement, and my research paper is basically about discrimination in the renting and housing market on the basis of certain things. So, food habits, marital status, sexual orientation, religion, that kind of stuff. And actually look at do we have laws that prevent this discrimination from taking place, or are the laws that are already in place facilitating this discrimination instead? That was my research question.
Great, great. So, because you bring up the topic about laws, my first question that instantly comes to my mind is, like talking from a legislative perspective, do you think that there are any backlogs from our side, which is leading to this discrimination?
So the thing is that there are many different types of housing in India. There's private housing, there's cooperative housing societies, and each of these have their own laws. So you can't really give it like there's no one answer. There are many different ways to go about it, and legislature wise, we have certain laws in place. Like, of course, we have our fundamental rights where it says that no discrimination is allowed on the basis of religion, sex, caste, all of that. But that applies only to discrimination by the state, not by private entities or businesses, if I'm not wrong. So, because of this loophole, so to speak, discrimination is quite rampant, which is unfortunate, but it happens.
Okay. So when you talk about cooperative housing, so I myself also live in a cooperative housing society. So can you explain us how is a cooperative housing society different from any other housing society, and how is that the structure of this cooperative housing society lead to discrimination or counter to it?
Okay, so a cooperative housing society is actually an association which has members in it. It comes under the fundamental right of freedom to form associations. And because of that, people don't own flats, individual flats. They actually own shares in the company or in the association and are then allotted flats. So these, because they function as associations, they can have their own bylaws as well. And again, because they function as associations, those bylaws can mean that they can create these cooperative housing societies for their own benefit, which means they are indirectly discriminating against those who are either not from the community or not from the religion or so on and so forth. Because if you have, if you know the fundamental rights, you have the right, the freedom to form associations to further your own, not further, but like protect your own culture. So using that rule, they kind of discriminate against people who are outside their community or religion, and so on.
What you're saying is, a person may be discriminated on the basis of his caste or his religion, but because now it's like a corporate housing society, so they have their own bylaws, so it can happen, and there is nothing that the government can or the legislature can do about it.
Yeah, in fact, there was a landmark judgment about, I think, 2 decades ago in Gujarat for the Zoroastrian Cooperative Housing Society, where they actually said that this community of Parsis can have sole access to certain cooperative housing societies. Like even in Bombay, there are so many bags, right? Khusro Bagh. Um, I, yeah, I'm not sure about the other names, but they all exist, and they're only they're restricted to Parsis. The sale, the ownership, everything. Because of this, and this was a landmark judgment by the High Court.
Okay,
So
great,
many
great,
people
great. Thank
use
you, thank
that
you so
as
much.
a basis now for uh, for further discrimination in that sense. Yeah.
Okay. I'd also read that even when we talk about our fundamental rights, like there are certain rights which the state has, which is a burden on the state, and some are for the people. So there's this Article 17, right against untouchability. So which is for everyone, which means that every person who would practice untouchability would be punished. But when you talk about right against the Article 15, which says discrimination on the basis of caste and religion, this right is specifically a burden on the state. So maybe if a person so the state cannot discriminate. It does not talk about the individuals over there. Like legally, it does not talk about the individuals. So
Yeah.
maybe that could also lead to the discrimination.
Um, yeah, that is possible. So, in with specific, like specifically to do with the rent discrimination thing, many houses, if they're not cooperative housing societies, if even if they're privately owned by people, uh, the thing is that they don't have to tell the person why they are not giving their house out for rent. They can just say whatever they want to. Like they can just say, "Oh, right now we don't want to rent it out," or maybe it's not about we want more rent. So in that way, they can say any number of things and turn the prospective tenant away. But your underlying thing is obviously the discrimination. You don't want to give it to that particular person who is from that community. So because the person doesn't know whether it's overt or covert, the person can't go to court because that there's no evidence, and there is no real law that can help you.
Oh, okay, great. That was very informative. Coming back to the research paper, what was your methodology? How did you go about with like taking the views of the people?
So I started off with I really wanted personal stories, and to get that, I started off by a Google form where I put down like basic questions, name, religion, caste, age, all of that. And then I asked more specific questions about, have you ever been discriminated against? Have you ever felt it? In what way? And then the last question was if they were willing to talk to me over the phone. So many people did agree. And so I spoke to them over the phone and got a more like in-depth view of everything, because up until then I wasn't sure if, I mean, they can just say yes, I felt discriminated against on the basis of my sex or my marital
Mm.
status. But when I spoke to them on the
Mm.
phone, I kind of got a deeper insight like as to what happened, what incidents led up to that particular moment. Were they told uh, were they told it to their face, or did they just were they just turned away without any explanation? Did they just find it extremely hard? Because I remember people saying that if they were Muslim, they found it much harder. Like they were taking 3 to 4 months to find a house, whereas Hindus comparatively were finding a house in like a few weeks.
So we're talking about people who have money, who have the financial support and everything, but just because of their
Yes,
backgrounds, they were discriminated against. Okay,
exactly.
that's
So
quite
it's not
interesting.
like oh, I don't have money to pay for this place. They have everything. They come from good educational backgrounds. They're working professionals or like good students, and they still, just because of their identity, because of their where they come from, they are not given a place to live.
Okay. So, my question would be, were these respondents like open about talking or sharing their experience? Like, how, or what was their approach? Were they, did they want the government to do something, or were they just, they were like, this is just normal now in the society and there's nothing that can be done? And like, were they okay in that sense?
Okay, so many people obviously were angry about it, but as far as I know from whoever I spoke to, nobody had actually taken any action against any of the landlords. They just kind of, grin and bear it and move on and look for another place. And at that point, I think it's just like they take what they can get. They're so fed
True,
up of
true.
looking.
Makes sense. Okay. So if okay now if we've covered the methodology, let's go on to the main content. So in your research paper, you talked about a lot of theories, and I could see that you related these theories to your research paper. So I think this is quite interesting, and as a junior researchers, for everyone who are researching, this is a good takeaway that you actually relate your theories to your paper. So, because it's, of course, theory club is also about breaking down these complex theories into simpler concepts. I thought it would be just fair if we could talk about these theories and discuss them. So, the first theory that you talked about was structural functionalism, or the idea of universal binaries. So, if you could explain what this theory means and how did you relate it to your paper?
Okay, so structuralism is the thing of binaries. It's basically where people look at the world and they divide everything into this is and this is not. So a table is not a chair, right? And using this construct of binaries, you kind of perceive the world around you. And this structuralism theory was the main proponent was Levi Strauss, and he said that these structures are almost universal. Like people across cultures across the world will have similar constructs like this. And functionalism is about it's a more sociological theory about how society is structured as parts and how these parts work together to make society function as a whole.
Okay,
So
so
that's
yeah,
the
go
theory.
on, go on.
So that's basically the theory.
Okay, so when we studied this theory, we were often told that society is like a human body where different organs act are like the social units, and when it comes together and works, then that is
Yeah,
how a body functions.
yeah.
Okay, so how did you relate this to the theory? Like, what is the research paper? Like, what is the context?
So with structural functionalism, I was looking at mostly how the legal aspect and the social and the political aspect function together, because your social thing is your culture, right? You're coming from a particular identity. Cultural habits can be anything, like whether you eat meat or not, or the way you dress, things like that. I was looking at how when they function together, they influence uh, people to discriminate against others, right? So, say, like, I remember this person telling me about how they went, they were a student and they were Brahmins. Because they were Brahmins, they were single women, and usually single women find it much harder to find a place. But because these were two sisters, they found it very easy because they were Brahmin to find a place in this particular area in Bombay, which was very Brahmin, Maharashtrian. They were also Maharashtrian. Background factors of people either help to get a flat, or kind of uh, prohibit you from getting a flat, so to speak. So all of these factors, even though they existed, the landlords were very happy to have them because of their other cultural backgrounds.
Okay. So it is like the cultural background is giving them a kind of validation. So it is not necessary that they do not like really follow the societal norms, but just their
Yeah,
background gives them a validation.
yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, great. Moving forward to the next theory, and you talked about historical particularism. So when I was like researching about this topic. What I believe and what I feel is historical particularism is that there are certain past happenings or the certain historical happenings, which is why you have certain perceptions regarding a community, and that influence you, and which is why discrimination happens. I think that is my understanding of the theory. So, if you could elaborate what this theory is and how did you connect it again?
So historical particularism basically tells you to look at a culture through the historical lens. So look at how history has created, how history has played out, and how it influences, how historical events influence our present culture. So, and context, in that context, look at cultures in that particular context. So how, what I looked at specifically in rent discrimination was the fact that in India we have had historically segregated housing. Like, even if you look at the structure of villages, will mostly be outside and a little
Yes.
away from the main village. And there
So,
are so many areas where many communities have been ghettoized or marginalized. So they all just live together. And this has been happening throughout history. So we need to take that into account when we're looking at the present scenario. That's basically it.
so these people wanting to live together, what in your opinion is the reason behind it? Is it because they want to preserve their culture, or is it because there is this fear of the other that they don't, maybe their cultural identity might be lost when they amalgamate with others?
So there are, I think, two ways this plays out, at least from whatever I um got from my primary sources. One is the landlords. It could be that they have this sense of preservation. They want to preserve their community and their cultural practices. So they don't want people who are meat eating, for example, or who are not married, or from a different religion. So that is one thing. And obviously, they could maybe fear them because of past instances or experiences that they've had with that particular community. That's very personal, of course. And then from the tenant point of view, it could also be, this is where the ghettoization comes into play, where sometimes many communities feel under threat when they are the only one, when they are the minority in the majority. So they would prefer to find a place or a house within, in a locality where their community is the majority. because then it gives them a sense of safety and security.
Okay, okay, great. So when I heard this, when I like when you talk about ghettoization, I think one example that comes to my mind is about this particular slum in the pocket of Mumbai where reside Muslims who were a part of the riots that was involved after the demolition of the Babri Masjid. So now they live in certain pockets of in certain slums, and they are afraid of the government. They're afraid of the people outside, and they've excluded themselves from the society. So they don't want any development. They let the students also study within in the slums itself, in the madrasas, and they don't want to develop, and that because there is this fear of the other. But at the same time, I think there's the other view where there are certain people in the slum itself who want to get a flat outside, and but but they just can't, because even if they do, the people outside then ask them to sell off their flats and vacate the flat because you are a Muslim from that particular slum. So I think that is also there. That they want. Firstly, it is the fear of not of like being excluded, and they don't want to go out because it's been so many years that they've lived together. And then at the same time, it is that the people do not want to include them now.
So this is a perfect example of what I was talking about.
Great. Right. 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 Okay. That was about historical particularism. Moving on to the next theory, you talked about cultural materialism. So, okay. So, if you could tell me what is cultural materialism, like you talked about three aspects, that is the superstructure, the structure, and the infrastructure. So,
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
So cultural materialism is basically looking at how material culture influences us, influences our behavior as humans. So your material culture is everything that's tangible, right? You have your infrastructure, not really tangible. It can be intangible. So that's where the superstructure and all come in. So it's what you see around you, the development, flowers, buildings, all of that. So for that, I was looking at how in Hyderabad is historically a very Muslim city. It has a very Muslim culture, but still, when this Muslim couple had gotten a job there and they were looking for a flat, they found it extremely hard to find a good flat in the vicinity of the IT park, the tech park where they were working, because it turned out that a lot of those flats were owned by Marwadis actually as investments, even if they were not living there, mostly investments, and they were not willing to rent it out to other people. So that's where the infrastructure thing can play out, because you think that okay, this like all the theories kind of merge together in this example.
True.
Um, and then then there is infrastructure, superstructure, and yeah. Sorry, just 1 second. Yeah. So the structure is basically your economic and political aspect.
Oh,
Okay. So that's where you have your family and your friendships and your social circle, and then your all of your the way your country is say politically organized, democracy, all of that.
okay.
So that comes into focus, because then you're at that point you're looking at your laws, right? So in India there are no real laws in that sense to actively prevent discrimination. Um, then there was this example of a person who was asked to actually, she was a single woman, Hindu, but the landlords wanted to talk to her parents because she was a single Hindu, because she was a single woman, because she was unmarried and working. They're like, only if we talk to your parents will we give you the flat. And she was so upset by this.
Yeah.
She said, I'm independent. I have my own job. I'm a working woman. And you're asking for my parents' permission.
Oh, oh, oh God. That's
So
terrible.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so when I see the pictorial like depiction of the cultural materials, I see that it is a pyramidal structure where superstructure is at the front, and then there's the structure and infrastructure.
Yeah, it's actually like concentric circles. Everything comes together and plays together. This is, I don't know why this is in a pyramid. Yeah.
Okay, okay, great. So, does it mean that your superstructure also in some way influences your structure in the sense that your culture and your religion and whatever the culture is of a country that influences the laws and the legislation in that country?
It is
Would it mean
possible.
that?
Like over here we have the Hindu marriage act and all of that. So
Mhm.
very possible. And yeah, so then the superstructure over here, like it's religion, values, art, all the extra stuff, right? Which is considered luxurious, art, literature, books, all of that. So
Okay, okay.
you consuming all of this can influence your behavior. Point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. Thank you so much. Moving forward to the next theory, you talked about dramaturgy. So now, when I was doing my research, my professors basically told me that it is not actually possible to back these accusations or counter the accusations legally because there aren't a lot of words involved in that sense. It is done very subtly. So I is that dramaturgy where you are someone on the inside, but it is a deception on the outside. You make it more subtle. So in that sense, is it dramaturgy?
Sort of. So dramaturgy is basically a theory which says that your entire life is like you're like you're on a stage. So
Mhm.
you're acting out different parts of yourself in different social situations or personal situations. And then there's the inner and the outer self. But you know, matched at some point. Wherein like, you might have certain beliefs and you might keep them to yourself and you might act differently around people who you have those beliefs about. But the is that you perform your identity. That is what dramaturgy is about. So I remember this one person who was looking for a flat in Delhi. For some reason, they were just not being shown nice houses in the area that they wanted to find a house in because of
Mhm.
convenience, closeness to the workplace, all of that. And they were finding it very hard. So then they looked for another broker, and this broker took them to really nice houses in the same area. And they were looking at a house, and this landlady came out. And when she heard his name, she realized that he's a Muslim. And she spat at his feet. And she's like, "Get out of here, we don't want you here." And she started yelling at the broker. Now, his name was such that sometimes it could be misheard as a Hindu name.
Oh.
So the earlier broker knew that he was Muslim and was only taking him to houses where the landlords had specifically said that, it was okay, they didn't care who was given the
Mhm.
house.
Mhm.
And this guy, thinking he was a Hindu, showed him a wider range because those were available to Hindus, those houses. And that's when he realized, like, that's when he felt really upset. But at that point, he didn't really do anything. He just left, and I think they found a flat in another area. But um, yeah, so it's the performing of one's identity as the landlady. Like she is saying, "Look, I don't want you here," and she's showing that. The other thing is the way you perform your identity as a tenant. Like, say you eat non-veg, or you dress in a particular way, or you pray 5 times a day if you're a Hindu, or you do pujas every morning. If you're a Muslim, if you do pujas every morning if you're a Hindu, that performance of your identity can influence whether you get a house or not.
Interesting, interesting. So here, uh, so I think that here it was a direct contact between the landlord and the tenant, which is why the discrimination was so rampant. But I think the broker over here acts as a middleman, where he knows what is the perception of the landlord and the tenant, and he somewhere like tries to neutralize it, like with his diplomacy and something.
Yeah, I think he has the trickiest job because he has to pacify both, his client and like his employee in that sense.
True, true. Okay, actually, when I was reading your research paper, I saw this example where you gave that there was this girl who had to drive out a tenant, not because she had a problem with it, but because the neighbors weren't okay with that person. Like the person was cross dressing. I think that was
Yeah.
the
Yes.
reason.
Yes.
So, do you think that this was it her inner identity that was reflecting, or was it the societal pressure then?
So honestly, I don't know that because I can't tell what her inner beliefs and all were. But from what she told me, she said that she honestly did not want to because she did not mind. But because that flat was only being it was being managed by someone she knew, even though it was her flat, she couldn't really step in because it had been in that person's care for so long, and she hadn't been living in that building at all. So then, most people want to avoid conflict. So she just did what was told
Hmm.
and, just let it go. And she told me herself that she was very ashamed of what she did. But at that point, she felt like she didn't have a choice.
Okay, so there's also the societal pressure that then maybe you do not want to do it, but the society forces you to.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, makes sense, makes sense. Well, I think that was the last theory that we were going to talk about. This was really great. I think we got to know a lot. So moving forward, what do you think can be done about it? Like, is there a resolution? Did you talk about that in your research paper?
Yeah. So when I was writing my research paper, I was very, very clear that I wanted to have like constructive suggestions or feedback because many research papers or studies that I've read, they're always just critiquing and criticizing the issue. And it's just like, okay, now this is the problem for someone else to solve. Like, we don't have to get involved. We did our job. So I was very particular that I did not want to do that. And um, I looked up other countries' laws to see if they have like there's a province in Canada called Ontario. They have laws which actively prevent discrimination, and you can take the person to court. So landlords are not. I mean, of course, they have rights if the tenant is misbehaving or damaging the property. But apart from that, landlords cannot hold withhold property from people who can afford it or are willing to pay for it, or like who can basically access it. There are many, like it's a very detailed law, and I was really happy to find it. So I did include that in my dissertation and said maybe this is what we can do in India, because discrimination across all forms, like across our society um, in any place and time, is very prevalent. So
So the only criteria over there is your money. If you have the money, you can get the flat no matter what your background is.
need for the flat, right? Because there are different types.
Uh-huh.
They have different categories of housing also. There's uh, there's social housing and all of that, because that will also be owned by somebody. But the basic premise is that you cannot discriminate against people on the basis of religion, sex, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, any of those things, and more. Like there's a lot more in that.
So, what I believe is because you in India we have this right to preserve our own culture, and I think that somewhere would clash with putting with actually introducing such stringent laws. Because at one point when you say that I can preserve my culture, then how can
You're
you tell
automatically
me?
excluding other people right there.
Right, right. Like so, landlords could just say that it is my flat, and I decide who I want to rent it to. Okay.
In the cooperative housing societies, actually.
Interesting, interesting. Okay. Moving forward, okay. So, in your opinion, like how would you conclude it? What were the difficulties that you faced while doing this research, and what do you think were your difficulties in that sense?
Okay, so the main difficulty was actually how to integrate the theory into the paper, like a jigsaw puzzle. Like I was like, okay, this is what happens to people. This is a theory that looks like it can explain why this happens, and just put the two together. I was very lost in that whole aspect. But I think as you go along, and of course, my teacher was really helpful uh, to me. She even found studies of other people, sent it to me, like EPW and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I think that was the main thing. The other thing is, I feel this is which is like taught to us in anthropology, that when you're writing ethnography, so you're studying other cultures and things, your own biases can play out and prevent you from doing an objective and thorough analysis or interpretation of the culture you're studying. So I feel like somewhere there also, the whole reason I chose to do this topic was because firstly I am a Muslim and I see discrimination all around me, but also because my dad actually told me a story about how Malayalis in this particular neighborhood in Bangalore were not being rented flats because it was believed that they took 2 baths a day. I mean, who knows, right? Who knows whether you take 2 baths a day? It was believed that they did. And because of the water shortage in that locality, they were not renting flats to Malayalis. So, like, you can see how culture and practical stuff kind of all comes together and plays a role in a
Got it. I mean, you could just rather talk to that person and tell him that we have certain problems rather than just making pre-assumptions and judgments in the head.
yeah.
That is so true. Actually, okay, so when I was also like reading your paper, now this is for all the junior researchers who are still in the process, like me, who have not written such big research papers, maybe. So, what would be your advice to us? And like, even if I say your style of writing, so you included a lot of examples, a lot of your personal opinions also. So, what how do you incorporate that style of writing in a research paper? Like that was quite different from other research papers that I read, which are mostly very objective in that sense and third person based. So what
Okay,
is
so
this style
I
of
did not.
writing?
Yeah, so I didn't give my personal opinions, but I used the personal pronoun of I. Like I heard this, or I observed this, or I was told this. Um, because I was trying to do it, I was writing in a more ethnographic style rather than a proper structured research paper. Because I had read this book by Nikhil Anand in class about uh, water distribution in Bombay. Anyway, the point was that I wanted something that was more personal because I felt like I'd be able to write that better instead of a very structured thing where you have one thing here and you have one thing here. I wanted like how culture is, it's all together and different things play a role in different situations or scenarios. That's why I didn't really have a review of literature separately. I use the examples to explain things, to give, like, flesh out the theories and inserted the studies that I had read up on in that, saying that this has also happened before and this has been studied by so and so person. So that's how I structured the paper. It was more like a story.
Okay, okay, great, great. So I think this brings us to the end of the paper. We have certain questions over here. So let's dive into that. So Gayatri Karnik says that don't laws like this, the ones which let communities have right to bar people from other communities, prevent gentrification and protection of minority communities.
Wait, you'll have to read that again.
Okay, okay. Don't laws like these, and by these she means the ones which let communities have right to bar people from other communities,
Okay.
prevent gentrification and protection of minority communities.
Um, I think that would be in some cases for sure, but I don't think. Um, if you're looking at specific places, like how historically cities, like the downtown areas, which are now being gentrified, were historically lower class, then yes. But honestly, I don't know, because there are also suburbs that are up and coming and, you know, residentially. So, because I think gentrification is more about commercial. I was looking more at housing. I don't know. I don't know how that
Okay,
relates.
so maybe it is also about, do these minorities actually need protection, or do they want to be included in the society? Or do they want to be as inclusive as others? So maybe
So,
it
like
is
I said,
their
it's all
call.
very subjective, right? You can't really know what a person is thinking or feeling unless they tell you, and if they're being honest. So,
True,
it
true,
really
true.
depends from person to person.
So moving on to the next question, we have Anand who says that why not collect data through surveys so that we can tangibly attack social evils instead of swimming in the theory? So why this theoretical approach maybe?
Because we're supposed to. I mean, I don't know. That's a question to ask professors. But honestly, I think theory is important, because what is theory except an explanation for a phenomenon? It's nothing else.
True.
It's just like a universal explanation.
Mhm.
So if you have that base, then you can build on that. And that's why I think it's important.
True, true. Because theories, of course, reflect what is going on in the society.
Exactly.
True, true.
They reflect it and then you apply it back to.
Mhm. Makes sense, makes sense. Thank you so much for that. We have Guntu Pathak who says that can you speak about housing issues of the Hijra community in India?
Okay, so this was one of the drawbacks of my study, actually, because initially I had done sexual orientation and sexual preference, um, but I did not get any primary sources. When I sent out my survey, I didn't get any people from that community, so I had to drop that, and I didn't look at it in my study.
But like okay, I also feel that these Hijra communities, again, there's this kind of ghettoization in them also, that because like I've also heard about stories that when such like pseudo hermaphrodite people are born in a family, these people come and they take away the child and they grow them in their own community,
Yeah.
and so they create their ghettos on their own, and maybe again this comes about them like creating this ghetto and thus not wanting to,
It's like
or not given a
self-preservation or
chance.
protection.
Right, right. Could be, could be. Okay, moving forward, there's another question by Aisha who says that are there any laws to protect the renters? So I think we talked about this a lot, and if you could like summarize what we had discussed prior.
So of course, renters have basic laws. Like they have the right to privacy. Your landlord can't come snooping around your house at any point. They have to inform you beforehand. Um, you do have certain rights with regards to electricity, water, all of that. And your landlord has to do the major maintenance. They're all very technical things. The other, like protection for, and this is after you are a tenant, protection for a prospective tenant, someone who has not yet been given a house to rent, there isn't really anything you can do about it. I did read one article where this person went to the court and said that because they were not given a place, they were buying a house, and because the cooperative housing society objected to it, they said that, this is a violation of my right to life, that battle. But I don't think that can be used in every situation.
Okay. Uh-huh. So okay, makes sense, makes sense. Moving forward, there is another question by Dylan D'Souza who says that are these kind of laws just reflective of the social divide which already exists in India? Thoughts on how these laws flow from social realities to law?
I think you had asked me this earlier also when I spoke about the Hindu Marriage Act. Um, so yes, I definitely think that many of our laws based on our cultural uh, society in general. Um, I think it is possible to change it, but it will take a lot of time because all of this is about mental, like it's about your attitude, right? Your beliefs,
True,
which
true.
are very difficult to change quickly. These are the things that take a lot of time to change or even reverse. And I really think that there should be stringent laws that are more based on objective reality rather than
Um, Shifa, I can't see you. I think our network connection.
yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So while laws may not always help, I think it is one of the ways in which you can change social practices for sure. Like we do have the right to, we have the fundamental right to not be discriminated against because of caste and all. While it may not have changed everybody's perceptions, in some way.
True, true. Okay, because now if the discrimination maybe is very rampant and now this becomes a very complex case, of course, about renting housing discrimination. But in other sectors, maybe these fundamental rights are of course helping you to prevent discrimination. So maybe this is because a very subtle topic in that sense, and it has a lot of factors involved. Maybe it gets difficult to challenge it in a court. True, true. Okay. We have another question by Shivam who says, okay, not as heavy as others. Renters and house owners right to have pets. Okay. Now people want you to talk about the right to have pets, and yeah, what is your take on that?
Well, I can only give you my personal opinion because I don't have any data on this. I feel like it is again here it's a personal choice because a pet is not something everybody has. It's a choice you've made. It's not who you are, right? It's not your it's not your background or your identity. It's not part. I, I go so far as to say it's not a part of you. Um, but yeah, I think that is totally based on personal opinion and choice.
Okay, okay, okay. Uh,
Yeah.
moving forward, Anand has another question, and he says that what do you think about universal housing and abolishing the concept of landlords? This topic came up as people weren't able to pay rent during the COVID situation.
Uh, I think it would really help, but I would have my doubts because a lot of people, like even when they do slum redevelopment program projects, a lot of them just sell off their flats and then move to the suburbs because they need that money. So it's not just about providing housing because a house is not just a structure. If it doesn't have water, electricity, places where you can buy things nearby, if none of that is affordable or given to you as well, it really makes no sense just to have the structure there, just a roof over your head.
So,
So I think everything has to be taken into account
so when we talk about
to
cooperative,
make sure it works.
yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
sorry. No, continue.
Okay, okay. So when we talk about universal housing, would that also mean the abolition of abolition of cooperative housing societies, and like would that work in our favor?
See, I don't know that you have to uh, remove the old stuff and like mm, yeah. So I don't know if by universal housing you mean that it's all owned by the state and no one has private property. It's a very like ethical, moral question that it's like saying I have a I have a really severe disease and I go to the hospital, but I have to wait in line. Whereas if you have the money, can you pay and get immediate medical attention?
Of course, like India is of course a mixed economy and not very. We are not totally socialist. We are a mix of capitalist and socialist. So yeah,
So
of course, right to
is
private
any
property.
extreme good? Is any extreme gonna work?
True. So maybe right to private property may not be a fundamental right, but it's a legal right.
Yeah.
So yes. Okay. Okay. Anand has replied. He says that Fugi people in Mumbai own like 5 flats and do nothing with them while people don't have roofs on their heads. Should there be limits to how much property you own? And not all housing owned by the state, but you can have cooperatives not based on or not for profit motive.
Okay. So if you're asking for my personal opinion, because I can't speak for other people, uh, I would say actually I'm also very confused about this. I don't know where I stand as yet. Because like I
Okay,
said, if
okay.
you have the money, then can you use it or not?
True. Actually, I was like seeing this documentary about slum dwellers of Dharavi. So these people are those who have loads of money actually, and they go to good jobs, and they can afford having burgers and fries also like on a regular basis. So they have money. But the reason why they don't want to get out of Dharavi is because you own a land over there. You don't own a flat. So that land over there can cost you like lakhs and crores of rupees because you own a piece of land. So they just don't want those skyscrapers because they just get a flat over there and not like the land. So that land is quite important to them. So they are okay with living in these slums despite having a lot of money. So yes, that could also be a perspective. Again, I totally agree that there are people who don't have roofs on their heads. So maybe the initiative of the government to convert slums into buildings that is being taken, the redevelopment of slums.
Mm.
So maybe that could help. Okay, moving forward, Shivan Chakravarti has another question. In what cases the landlord deny you housing without citing discrimination, like caste or creed or gender?
Okay, so this can happen in a privately owned property because in a cooperative housing society you can just say that no, this is according to our bylaws. Privately owned property or flats, um, they don't have to give you a reason. Like I said before, they can just say that look, we don't want to rent out at this point, we need the flat right now. They don't have to say we don't want to rent it to you, and they don't have to give a reason as to why. So that's how they get away with it.
True, and we also have the middlemen, that is the brokers. So again, the landlord
It's
could tell this.
because this is specifically private property, and the state in no place says that the individuals have to practice a non-discrimination thing. As I mentioned earlier in the fundamental rights, right
Mm-hmm.
against discrimination is only for the state.
Right against this. Oh, yes, yes, right, right. Okay, we have a bunch of other questions also coming in. Maybe let's just wait for a second. uh, just a second. Uh, okay. Anand has replied back. He says that don't want to take your time, but do you think morally it is okay for people to be homeless when you have empty homes?
No, morally, I do not think so.
True, true. Of course, that is a straight right answer. But of course, um, I think in the reality, there's a lot of other aspects also. Do the people have the money? Is the government doing something about it? So the government is taking up
It's not
initiative.
so black and white, I would say. Like you can't just say, okay, there
Hmm.
are homes here, there are homeless people, put the two together. It's gonna be fine, you know.
True, true, true. Uh, okay, that's all the questions that we had right now. This was so
Okay.
fun, and we thank you so
Yeah.
much. We got to know so many perspectives, and I think it is safe to say that the aspect of rent discrimination or housing discrimination is very complex in that sense, and may have very a lot more perspectives. It is not really black and white as you said, because it involves like years of historical discrimination and beliefs in judgments of people. It becomes quite complex to like eradicate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so any conclusions or concluding notes that you would like to give?
Uh, well, I think I just like to say that for me, studying this topic was very interesting because typically looking at the legal aspect, and I think that really opened my eyes to um, to really want to bring about a change in the law, at least, because like I said, it might not really change much, but at least you have some remedy, you have some punishment or course of action that can be taken if in case you are discriminated against. I think it really made me see that even if discrimination is something cultural, like something has to be done about it. You can't just let it keep going on like this.
Great, great. I think that quite summarizes what we discussed. So this brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Shifa, for joining
Thank
us,
you,
and
thank you.
thank you for taking out your time to discuss your paper with us. I would
Yeah,
also
you were a
like
great
to
host. Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank my co-head Neil, who is actually behind the screen and handling everything, like the stream and the PPT and everything. Yeah, thank you so much. Also, thank you to all our lovely audience. Thank you for being so supportive and interactive, and all those questions. Actually, they made us think a lot, and yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. And this brings us to the end of the session. So I'll just end the call.